Welcome, ladies, to the Real Estate InvestHER Show, providing inspiration, strategies, and insight to empower women investors to live balanced and financially free lives. Now, here are your co-hosts, Liz and Andressa.
On today's episode, ladies, we have Param Bala. She is a physician who recently became financially free, and just really excited to have her on our show today because she speaks about so many important things, the journey, if you will, of financial freedom. It's really it's not like a destination. And I think what was most helpful that we really get to is the power that there's really not one way to do this. And she kind of talks a lot about, okay, consider your risk tolerance, consider X, Y, and Z. So we really get into really some specific areas that you really need to think through and kind of brainstorm so that you can make the right choices of, okay, if this is my goal, which strategy is going to get me there. So, it was really helpful to kind of go through that, right? Andressa, to really talk through what her journey was. It may not be someone else's, but it was really some great kind of thought-provoking buckets, if you will, that we need to look at in order to get us in the right direction.
Yeah, she realized when looking at the quadrants, right? She was in a different quadrant than her parents. She was on the employee quadrant while her parents were in the business and investor quadrant. So something didn't match there. And then she stopped and she thought about, what is my financial freedom number? And I think that this is super important. Unless you get down to that number, things are not tangible. Things are like very overwhelming and you're like, 10, 15 years until I reach that. So we go there. And I think that if you're listening and you want to become financially free, but not when you're like 70, right? You're just like, no, how can I do that in a shorter period of time in a way that works for me and for my family and the lifestyle that I want to? So she shared her strategy and how she was able to do that.
Welcome back, ladies. This is Liz.
And this is Andressa.
Welcome back to the Real Estate InvestHER Show. We are excited about another episode here. We have Param Bala on our show today. Welcome to our community, our show, and sharing yourself with everyone here. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we're looking forward to jumping into your story here in a moment. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, thank you. Thank you for taking your precious time, right? Time is the one limited resource we have. We always like to say, right? So thank you for taking time. We don't take that lightly. Andressa and I bring our A game as much as we can to this podcast and just pouring into all the women that are on this journey with us of creating financial freedom in a balanced way. So thank you for taking time. And if you're on this journey with us and you've heard all of our episodes, thank you too. We continually like to kind of step it up and just give you as much value as we can in the time with you. So we always like to kick things off with just a quick tip, right, Andressa? Just something that's coming up for us and coming up we always like to say, if it's coming up for us, it's coming up for other women. And we really are all about creating a community here that's not just about creating financial freedom, but doing it in a way that works for us as women. With all the things we have happening in our worlds and in our life, and it just gets we can't just laser focus, do one thing in our life, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of things going on, and how do we do that in a way that works for us on our own terms? That's what we're all about here. So, Andressa, I have the tip, right?
It's your turn.
It's my turn.
We
take turns.
Today.
We're polite most of the time.
So when we remember.
Yeah, when we remember. That's right. So here's what I have for you this week. I had a conversation. With a friend, and she was going through, she had a tough conversation with someone, and it was interesting because we're talking, and I'm kind of like the friend therapist. Most people do come to me.
And
those, because I actually got interesting note about myself is that I got my degree in social work. So I actually wanted to be a therapist. That was my goal. And then I never actually professionally fulfilled that. But I think I am just unlicensed therapist, if you will. But anyway, talking with her, and she was sharing a few things that happened with this communication breakdown in a simplistic way. And she's sharing it with me, and I the first thing that came to my mind obviously I'm being empathetic because I do that very well. I hope to do that well. But the first thing that came to my mind was I thought, what did she do? What could she have done differently to maybe cause a different reaction? And we had a conversation, we had a really good conversation. We've had a couple of conversations since then, but something popped in my head as a follow-up to that. It's really very subtle for women specifically. That was the first thought I had. I mean, I was empathetic, of course. But the second thought or the third thought, whether I said it or I didn't say it, I did say it because I have that relationship with this person. But why do we always go there as women? In a sense of like, what did you do to cause this? And I mean, I know now she wasn't being physically abused. That wouldn't have been, obviously, I know, that's not appropriate and that's not the reaction. But why do we do that in such a subtle way? And why did I do that? And I'm a very empathetic person. I just got me thinking and getting really curious. Like, I gotta stop. I want to stop doing that. And it's not about for women in being empowered. Like, we shouldn't always, and I say it to myself. So me asking her is also very reflective of my own processes. When something doesn't go right I always come back to myself. Now, there's a light there that we all need to be accountable, right? What could I have done differently? And that's a empowering thought on one level. But why was that the first question I had for her? And I think it's subtle in our society. It's subtle as women. It's subtle in our upbringing that we do kind of take things on. And, maybe it's in light of women's equality, celebrating women's equality this week. I don't know where, I got really curious and I had a really good thought in my process. And I spoke to her afterwards about this too. Like, we got to stop saying that as the first thing. Yes, we need to take accountability. Yes, we need to look at ourselves in situations and say, hey, what could I have done a little differently? But I think it's very subtle for women to take it all on us. We take it all on our backs. And we don't be like, no, that was inappropriate, or that could have been done differently. And I don't own that reaction from that person. And I think we all need to I could do a better job of that. I think we all need to watch the subtleness of just taking it all in, being the punching bag. And I think women need to stop that in our lives, and we need to stop even supporting people in that way. Like, yep, they're done differently, but hey, let's talk about you and how that was inappropriate, and how let's talk about now we can go from there. So I just want to share that because I'm learning always and growing. And I think it's the subtle things in our lives that either we are able to grow or we just keep doing what we're doing. And we're leading an empowered group of women in our society. So you sure as hell better believe that I'm going to keep looking at myself in the mirror and saying, 100%. I want to do things a little differently. And I want to stop that with women because women are much stronger and much more resourceful as we're giving ourselves credit for.
Because it's subtle, because it's not so explicit, it requires a lot of awareness, right? And otherwise we wouldn't even think about it. And I think that, when I hear it, well, he or she did that, that's why I reacted this way. If he or she, they wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have reacted that way. And I just don't agree with that whatsoever. Whatever somebody does, it's on them. How I react to it, it's on me. Has nothing to do with what they said or how they said, how they put. We really live in a melting pot, right? Param, English, it's not probably your first language, neither mine. And we have this conception that we're playing the same game, the same field, and we make assumptions. Oh, he said that way. This is what it meant. And we need to take a step back, take a deep breath.
Always
read the 4 Agreements, the book 4 Agreements. It's one of the best things that I will highly recommend. And come from a place that, okay, independently of what people say, how I react to it has nothing to do with how I perceived.
Yeah.
And it's on me.
And the women listening for the first time are like, I thought this was about real estate investing. Let me don't turn the off button just yet. Why this is so powerful is that we are
why the hell you're talking about this?
Why I'm talking about this is I just like to talk, so I just think of things. Now, I'm talking about this because it's really important to be very, number one, honest with yourself, to say what's working, what's not. And really, quite honestly, as an investor, as a successful investor, you continually have to think about the relationships you're building and the results that you want. So it always comes back to, what results do I want from this relationship with a lender or a private money partner or a tenant or a new business partner, right? It's all there for us as investors. And so many times we just sometimes we give our power away and we don't look at what I could, how I can show up as my best self and my best supportive self. And in this situation with my friend, I am going to be supportive, but I also need to be thoughtful about how things play out in very subtle way, especially for the role I have and then what I've taken on in my own life. I take that very seriously, what Andres and I are doing. This is not just a business. This is a passion for us. And so I take that seriously, very seriously. I don't take a lot of things seriously. That's one of them. And so I think we often, as leaders of our own lives and our own investing journeys, we have to be like, wow, okay, I can say this a little differently, or I need to do this a little differently, or, I need to watch the subtleness of my own stuff, whatever your stuff is. I don't know what your stuff is, but I know you have something. We all do. So that's why I'm bringing it up, because it is so connected to becoming a better investor, especially as you grow in the journey and you start lending money out. You start being like, you're completely financially free. That's when this stuff even matters more, not when you're actually starting out. So I just say that because I want to speak to the women that are part of our community. All of it matters. So without getting off my
good stuff,
high horse, I don't know, talking, whatever that's called. I never forget what the terms are called. I'm like, but anyway, I'm going to stop saying that and transition to our wonderful guest.
I don't even know what that is, so I'm like,
the
new word.
Param, do you know what I'm talking about? When you're on you're on your high horse, or you're on your.
I think it is high horse, getting off the high horse. Right?
Yeah, getting off the high. Okay, thank you. I always say the wrong thing.
But I get where you're coming from, Andres. A lot of them, the metaphors are lost on me too. When you come from a different culture, that happens.
I have no excuse to not know these things, but I just do. And I think my kids have taken all my brain cells. So I'm going to rack it up. But thank you so much for being on our show, Param. We always like to kind of kick things off with our guests. With, what propelled you to get involved in real estate investing? I know it wasn't boredom, because you're a medical professional. So I know it wasn't that, but I'd love to hear in your own words, what propelled you to get involved in investing and do all the amazing things you're doing now with your investings.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Let me start off by saying that. And just to hop onto what you were just talking about, just with women, I think it's so important for us to find that balance between accepting ourselves and taking responsibility for our actions, which is exactly what you were talking about. And as investors, when we're on this journey, I think as women, we have more limiting beliefs, right, that stop us. And then we also take on other people's limiting beliefs because they're constantly passing it on to us. And I think we tend to take that on and stop ourselves. And I've done that. So I think it's so important that you talked about that. It's key for anyone who's investing in real estate. And I also want to say how much I enjoy listening to your podcast. I love how both of you bring financial freedom and having a balanced life together, because that is so important. So this year, even though I'm a medical professional, I'm a radiologist, I became financially free, and I did that because I needed that balance in my life. So I love what you guys are doing and the mission. But just going into how I got started. I was born in India, and I grew up in the Middle East. And my parents were both the equivalent of W-2 workers, and they had, while they were working, they were constantly buying land. My dad was a civil engineer, so he was building these small apartment complexes, doing all of that. But there really wasn't a transfer of information because my dad wanted me to become a physician. And Andres, I know you know what I'm talking about, right? So they want you to become a professional, and that's just what you do. So I am the first physician in my family. I think we have one more physician since then, but so that was my path. And I think the assumption just was that there was no need for me to even think about real estate or passive income because I'm going to be making good money. So why think about it? So all of that was happening. My parents, were building their empire, but I moved to the United States. I became a radiologist. I finished training and then first year out of training, my colleague at work, he was a third generation investor, and he kept he mentored me. I call him my mentor because I used to teach him things, and he would teach me investing, and he taught me about the stock market, and he kept insisting that I invest in real estate, and he introduced me to his team, and it made a lot of sense to me, and so I reached out to his team, but then again, I had all these limiting beliefs holding me back. I wasn't really sure, and then that was the time the market had crashed and was just beginning to stabilize, 2011. And I took on other people's limiting beliefs about investing in real estate. So my journey didn't really start till, say, 2014, when I purchased my first property. And then I looked at the cash flow at that point, and it wasn't that much. But I realized that at that time, I felt that it wasn't going to replace my clinical income, and I put it on the back burner. So I was investing in the stock market. I had this one rental. I purchased another rental in 2018, and I paid all cash because that's what my mentor was doing. I didn't understand leverage. I didn't know how to run my numbers. So, and then 2019, so there's always this inflection point in your life, right? To the point where things change. So 2019, I had a rough job transition. There was a merger at work, a lot of uncertainty. I felt like I was losing autonomy, so I shifted jobs, and it was a rough 6 months. It was really hard. My kids were in India. I was here, and I just looked at my finances, and I went, well, okay, so it's almost 10 years. I was getting close to the 10-year mark. I was like, how much passive income do I have? And, is it okay if I scale back significantly? And I realized that with my savings, it will only take me 4 or 5 years based on what my annual expenses were. And then I looked at my stock portfolio, and it really wasn't throwing. You have a 4% safe withdrawal rate in retirement from your stock portfolio. So I didn't know that. I learned that at that point. And then if you apply that to get $100,000 in cash flow, to be able to withdraw that from your portfolio, you need $2.5 million stashed away in your stock portfolio. I was nowhere close to that. So then I looked at my real estate portfolio, and I had a third of my money in my real estate portfolio, but it was throwing out twice as much money as my stock portfolio. And I was like, okay, that was my light bulb moment. I was like, okay, I'm doing something differently. And, you think you're a professional, you have a high income. That doesn't necessarily translate to high net worth. It's almost like having golden handcuffs, because you have this high income and you rely on it. And the traditional path is to work till you're 65 and then retire. And you're stuck doing that, because if you're only investing traditionally, like in the stock market, to get to that point where you have $2.5 million and you're able to withdraw safely from that to meet all your needs, it's going to take a long time. And I didn't want to be doing that. My kids were, at that time, they were 2 and 5. I wanted to spend more time with them, and I didn't want to have this anxiety again about job transitions and not having autonomy and being burnt out. So I know both of you love this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was the pivotal moment for me. So I read it, and he talks about the 4 quadrants, being employed or self-employed, and then being a business versus investor. And I was like, wait, I'm in the E quadrant, and that's the worst place to be. And he also talks about the 5 people that you interact with the most and what quadrant they are in. And I looked, and I was like, everybody was an E except my parents, who were business people and investors. Because at that point, they had retired from their W-2 jobs, and they'd built a couple of businesses back home. And then they always had the real estate empire that they were building. And I was like, wait, I'm doing something wrong, and I need to be shifting. And so that was the inflection point for me. So I remember I took the book, and the last page, I sat down and I had a 3-year goal written down. So I was like, okay, I'm going to buy these many properties. And I actually did the research and found out what my financial independence number was. So that's the number that I need to hit in passive income every year for me to meet all my family's expenses, including discretionary spending. And I was just, it had to be passive, right? So I'm not talking about tax savings because I'm active in my real estate business, or not talking about, I love medicine. I'm still going to be working a few days in medicine every month. I'm not including that because that's active income. I coach. I'm not including my coaching business. I was looking purely at passive income that my real estate was going to throw off. And I made a 3-year goal. And the amazing thing about goal setting is that once you set those goals, invariably you hit those goals faster than you think you're going to be able to do it. Within a year, I had 5x my portfolio, and I had 10x the income from it. And then I was like, okay, I thought it was going to take 3 years. It took me 1 year. I'm where I am. And at that point, I also found that it was a year into the pandemic. There was a lot of uncertainty for medical professionals with the pandemic, and a lot of us took on more volume than we were used to before the pandemic, and I was getting burnt out. So there were days where I was working from home, which is amazing. I had that. I'm blessed to have been able to do that as a radiologist. But I was working till midnight. My kids were sleeping in the office with me because they wouldn't go to bed without me. And I was juggling more than I could handle. And then I looked at my passive income and I said, wait, I'm at the point where I'm financially free. So I am going to choose to scale back. My daughter was 3 at that time. And I said, I have 2 more years with her before she goes to school. I'm just going to do it. And I decided to just say, I'm going to work a day a week in medicine. I love that. I'm going to have time for my real estate. And yeah, that was that. I've built my portfolio at this point to where I do short-term rentals and I've done bursts. That's because I was in the growth phase and I wanted to, scale rapidly. But then the amazing thing about real estate is that you can titrate things. So in a few years, I'm probably going to go back to where everything's completely passive and I'm completely hands off. And that's how I like it to be. But yeah, real estate is the vehicle that got me to where I am. For me, that was like, it was mind blowing. And I started talking to friends about it. I was trying to talk to everybody I could meet. And I felt like I wasn't having enough of an impact. So I started these social media groups where I started, getting professional women together and talking to them about the magic of real estate investing. And the community just grew to the point where now, we have a community and I mentor a lot of professionals so that they can use the same principles to get to financial freedom.
Right. So, for our investor community and everybody that are listening to us, when we talk about financial freedom, for a lot of people, it's exciting. For others, like daunting, right? Because it's a foreign concept to even think about when they look at their current lifestyle, what they have as an income, an expense, and how they can possibly create that passive recurring income so they can live life on their own terms. And that's what we are all about it. And I want to emphasize what you just said, that you had to figure out your number, because there isn't a number that applies to everybody, right? A single person that lives in a studio in San Francisco, for example, let's say, it's completely different than a family in New Jersey with high taxes. We are talking different numbers. So walk me through, for the people that are listening to it, is this just a matter of like income and expenses? How did you come up with that number? And I am also curious, did you have to adjust your lifestyle in order to meet that number quicker, or what worked for you to really reach that number in a short period of time?
Yeah. So what I did, Andressa, was that fortunately I live in Bakersfield, California, so the cost of living isn't as bad as some other places. But that being said, I like to, so when you're factoring those numbers in, right, you're talking about income and you're talking about expenses. So I think it's very important for people when they looking at that income to also factor in pensions or social security that they may get at a certain point, and then the age at which they're getting it. But if you're looking to become financially independent sooner, then you're likely not going to be factoring all of those numbers in. It's possibly just going to be passive income, which would be from your stock portfolio, where you would be withdrawing a little bit from it. You want to be withdrawing safely, which is where we talk about that 4% withdrawal rate. So if you have a portfolio, you're going to start withdrawing today, to be safe and to know that it's going to last you 30 to 50 years, which is what you want any passive income to do. You want to use those numbers and figure out how much you're getting from that portfolio. And then the rest of it would come from any other source of income that you're generating. But when you're doing expenses, and I have a complete worksheet on my website that people can go to if they want to look at this. But when you're thinking about expenses, you're going to include everything, right? So you're going to include your mortgage, all childcare costs, anything else that you spend on the kids. You're going to be including utilities, expenses for your car, gas, insurance costs. So if you have a W-2 job, and that's one of the things that keeps people stuck in those jobs is the benefits that you get from it. So you're going to be factoring in all your insurance, like life insurance. You may not need disability insurance at that point, but healthcare, auto insurance, insurance on your home. So all those insurances, and then you're also going to include discretionary spending, anything that you spend on travel, because as you said, it's also important to have that lifestyle end of the day. And for some people, it may mean scaling back. And I've seen a lot of people do that successfully because there are ways to spend less and still have a fulfilling life. It has nothing to do with, taking luxurious vacations. But if you want to be able to continue to do that, then you want to factor that into your equation. So you talk about all kinds of expenses that you may have, including health insurance costs, childcare, the cost of private school if you're sending your kids extracurricular activities, and all discretionary spending, groceries, all of that is included in there. And that's how you come up with that number.
Love that. You also talk a lot about like building a portfolio that like works for you. And I think that's just something to highlight, and we can kind of talk through what's your process. Obviously, it comes back to income and expenses, but it's bigger than that, right? Lifestyle is more than just the numbers. And I think about so many times, right? People want to get into a particular asset class or because they think they should, or it's what everyone else is talking about, or just fill in the blank. And I don't think there's as much of a mindfulness to say, okay, is this going to get me to the lifestyle that I want? So what were some of the questions that you asked yourself? Because you had to have asked yourself some questions and get really like honest with yourself. Beyond the income expenses, all the things you just said were great. And I think that's really a layer that needs to happen. What were those other questions though, to say, what will work for you? Because it's bigger than just money, right? It's how much time I'm spending on managing that asset, to your point. How we treat a short-term rental, if we're managing it, is different than another asset class in another state, right? And so I'm curious what questions you asked yourself. How did you get clear for yourself as you navigated where to spend your time and energy on which asset class to get you to that number goal?
Yeah, that's a great question, Liz. And so I think the way most of us start out is that we see a friend or a colleague doing something and we almost feel like, and across the board, when I talk to people, this is what they say, but this is what I've seen people do. And then you feel like that's the only way to do it. And sometimes that brings up all these limiting beliefs. Well, they can do that, but I can't do that because I don't have the time, or I don't have the money, or it doesn't fit my risk profile. And so that's what I like to talk about. Is the real estate is not a one size fits all thing. There's so many different ways of doing it. I think it's so important for you to pick what works for you. So for me, I started off, so my mentor, the way he was doing it is he lived in New Jersey and he owned all his rentals in Tennessee. So he was doing out of state investing. He had a great team on the ground, a property manager who was helping him to manage everything. And it was just mailbox money for him. And that's how he did it. And he paid all cash for most of his properties without using leverage, right? That worked for him. And so when I started off, I started doing that because essentially what you do is you find something that works for someone and then you take the same thing. You're not reinventing the wheel. You take that and you just apply the same principle. So that's how I started off. And it worked great for me because at that time, I didn't know for sure if I was going to settle down in Bakersfield, California. And so just having an out-of-state portfolio worked because I could keep building that. And I still had the mobility to move if I needed to. And it was also very passive. So with out-of-state investing, and I think it's scary for some people when they hear about it because they think that it's easier to just have your portfolio close by. But because this is what I had seen and I'd seen how he was doing it successfully, it was easy for me to just build on that. As long as you have a great team on the ground, you can keep it super passive and you could just keep building that portfolio. And that's how I started. But and then over time, what happened is that I started, because I wanted to grow rapidly, I started doing the BRRRR model where I'm buying, rehabbing properties and recycling my money. So I started doing that and short-term rentals. And I was using some advanced tax strategies to be able to shelter my clinical income. And for that, I needed to materially participate and put more hours in. So I shifted my strategy to where I started becoming more active because it was going to give me more returns. I was recycling my money and using it to rapidly scale. So I shifted to a more active way of managing those my portfolio. And so I just realized that I was easily able to transition from passive, like completely passive with my out-of-state portfolio. And like, this is passive with direct ownership, right? You're directly owning these properties, to active. And then I know I can confidently go back to passive whenever I want to. So the biggest thing for most people is like, okay, I don't have the time. And that's a big limiting belief. So this is not going to work for me. And I like to say that there are so many ways of doing it. And you can be completely hands off and still grow your portfolio, or you could be super super active if you want to use those tax strategies, materially participate, or if you want higher returns, right? Because that's essentially what you're doing when you're active, you're getting higher returns. So that's one way of shifting strategies. And the other big thing that people say is, well, I don't have the money to just invest and scale rapidly. It's going to be super slow. So it's not going to really help me get to that point. But then again, that's the thing with real estate investing. So like my mentor, he just went all in, all cash, and he doesn't like to be leveraged. And over time, I've realized that leverage is super awesome if you don't have the money or you want to grow rapidly, because your returns are significantly higher, and your not just your cash flow, but the equity that you're building up in those properties is also significantly higher when you leverage. So I've taken the middle path in that, and you can pick where you want to be, and then creative financing, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be all your money. You can use other people's money. You could do the BRRRR strategy, like we talked about, where you're rehabbing a property, forcing appreciation, because you can do that with real estate. You don't have to wait for market appreciation. You can force appreciation and then recycle that money, and you can leverage. That's the beauty. So when you use creative financing, a lot of people, especially when in the non-professional space, are building massive portfolios without really having to put a lot of their own money into it. So again, there's so many strategies you can use. You can have little to no money in that. In your portfolio, and you can still scale rapidly. So I don't think money should be a limiting belief, although it is for a lot of people. And I just want them to see that there's so many ways of doing it. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing is risk appetite, right? So a lot of people will say, well, real estate is risky, because I know a friend who had this, and then the tenants trashed the place, and it doesn't work. And then this person was a builder, and see what happened with the pandemic. And it's the same thing. It's like, you can pick what works for you. I'm super conservative. I like to really, know where I'm going in. I don't like taking a lot of risk. So I buy Class A minus and Class B properties in hybrid markets where there's great, rent growth, but then there's also a decent amount of appreciation happening. So it's not just a cash flow or an appreciation market. So hybrid markets, and I like stabilized residential, which is a safe space to be, because everyone needs a space to live. And that's how I risk stratify. And then education, right? When you educate yourself, you're really taking a lot of that risk out. And then there are some people who go in with, and I've done this too, when you go in with, when you do a rehab project, or you do short-term rentals, or you're going into ground-up developments, you're taking on a little more risk, but for higher rewards. And you could choose to do that if that's what you want to do, and if you have the reserves and the resources to do that, or you could stay super conservative, and you could just pick where you want to be on that spectrum. And that's what I like to coach about, right? So you get to pick, and it doesn't have to be as scary, and you don't have to have the same experience as your neighbor, because you get to pick what works for you based on what your goals are. And if you're trying to get to passive income within a few years, then your goals can be very different from someone who wants to work for the next 15 years, but just wants to keep building wealth. And so it's not one size fits all. There's a different strategy that would work for everyone.
I want to pick back on the short-term rental strategy. I've been doing for quite a long time, and I think that especially right now, the opportunity is there. In an interview with Avery Carl, we were talking about different strategies to do even short-term rentals, which can be completely different. And I really love a strategy that she mentioned, that one of the biggest challenges for short-term rental is really the initial money that you need to put in. Right? Sometimes you need to fix the property. A lot of the times, all the time, you need to furnish and make sure the property looks nice. One thing that she said is like, you can really cut a lot of cost if you purchase a vacation home that is already furnished, and you can just, give a lift. That will save you a lot. So for all of you that are looking to short-term rentals, Avery just launched a book about it. We highly recommend her. And they also trained investors that want to have short-term rentals out of state. So I love that, because if I had that training before, probably I wouldn't have made so many mistakes during my journey. So for those of you that want to check Avery out, her website is the shorttermshop.com. Check her out. We're going to add that information on our show notes too. So for short-term rental, Param, what have you learned that really works? If you were to pick, like, this is my must-have when I am analyzing a short-term rental potential deal? What does it make it a deal for you, and what does not make a deal for you? Because I think that that's where the entrance point, right? For all the folks that are looking into this strategy, what are your criteria?
Yeah, so the short-term rental space is so fluid because things are changing constantly, right? Even with the economic trends, I think the first few months of COVID, a lot of the short-term rental spaces didn't do so great because everything was shut down, and then it picked up with a huge boom. So so I think. I mean, if you look at, I feel on my spectrum, I think long-term rentals are more conservative, and short-term rentals, you can get great returns, but you really need to know what you're doing. And the most important thing, and I'm sure you've realized this also, Andressa, is regulations, right? Picking a market where you really know the regulations support short-term rentals. And even when you pick something where the regulations right now are friendly, I think it's really important to know what your exit strategy is going to be in the event that something changes over time, because in a lot of markets, even those that are super short-term rental friendly, things have been changing. So I think it's important to just know what your strategy is and factor all of that and be super conservative about underwriting the property. And the thing with short-term rentals is also running numbers differently because there are more assumptions, right? So you want to make sure you understand the occupancy rates and the average daily rates. You want to run those numbers very conservatively, because I think, and you've seen this, Andressa, so I think pre-pandemic, the numbers were very different from what they are right now. And so I think, be conservative about that, and pick a market where hopefully you're having, it's a year-round short-term rental space, right? So it's not too seasonal. And if it is seasonal, then make sure you're factoring all of that into it. So the numbers, that's huge, making sure you're actually underwriting the property correctly. But I like what you said about, and a lot of people have been doing this, about buying the property as a second home, where you're able to get better financing, we're able to put less down, you get better interest rates. And I think that really does make a huge difference when you're running the numbers, if you're able to get it financed as a second home. Again, you need to talk to your lender and make sure you're meeting all the criteria, and then they're okay with it. Because I think some lenders are particular about the first year of, about how it's used the first year, but just make sure, but make sure you go with a lender who is okay with you using the property as a short-term rental, even year one. And then that's a great way to make those numbers actually work favorably for you. I tend to be very conservative. So I like places where if you're purchasing it and if it's a place that you tend to go to often, you could have some dual use, because I think having that dual purpose in there, I think it adds that layer of safety. So in the event that, things don't work out and the numbers aren't great, and even if you're breaking even at that point, I think it still makes sense because you have a property that's increasing in value, hopefully over time, and you have that equity build up, but you're also able to use it for your family. So I think that's a way of staying conservative with it. And then I think one thing I want to mention is the fact that if you're self-managing a property, you get huge tax benefits with the short-term rental, because if you have material participation, and then there are 7 tests to meet that. I think the easiest ones to meet are if you're spending 100 hours or more on that property and more than anybody else, or 500 hours managing that property, then you're able to do what's called cost segregation and bonus depreciation, which is where you're accelerating the depreciation on a property, which the depreciation is what a lot of real estate investors get, and the IRS allows that. That's a paper loss that helps you shelter other income. So if you are materially participating, then you're able to get those huge tax benefits. I think for a lot of professionals who have large W-2 incomes where they're paying huge taxes, that's something that really, it just makes those numbers more juicy, more favorable when you're factoring that in. But if you're not going to be self-managing, then property management costs can be significantly higher for a short-term rental. So you want to be accurately plugging those numbers in. So sometimes it can be as high as 30%, so but anywhere from 15 to 30%. So make sure you're putting all of that in. You're factoring in supplies and everything else, and then the cost of furnishing. Definitely. But again, if you're materially participating and you're self-managing, then you should be able to get a tax benefit on, you should be able to expense that out, or because it's personal property, and then be able to get some tax savings on that. So actually makes that cost less, more palatable when you're doing that. But yeah, factoring all of that in and making sure you're running the numbers right. And that's super important. There are a lot of short-term rental calculators out there, which are very different from your long-term rental calculators. And I have one on my website. There are so many other sources for it. Just make sure when you're running that property, you're running the numbers right and you have exit strategies, because if things change, you need to be able to figure out what you want to do.
Love this. I want to circle back to Param. You said, with regards to I think it's so important what you're saying around, I mean, the tips you're giving with the short-term rental process is huge. I'm Andressa knows so much more about short-term rentals than me. I'm like in kindergarten when it comes to short-term rentals, because we focus more on long-term assets over our tenure and commercial and a bunch of other things. But I think the bottom line, right, so many times is like you have to know your niche. You have to know that this is a business, and you have to study that business just like you would any business for that matter. But I love what you're saying too, and you were talking a moment ago too about before the BRRRR and the short-term rentals. These are strategies that are getting you to your greater goals. And so many people don't spend any time even figuring that they want more cash flow, right? Obvious. They want more wealth, obvious. They may want to leave their job, obvious to them, but it's not, it has to be so much more in depth, I think, before they actually jump in. So many people are like, should I do this or should I do that? Well, yeah. Okay. I have no idea how to even answer that. Where to even begin to answer that question? That is such a big question that how many times you get that, Andressa? Should I flip this property or should I get into short-term rentals right now?
I have a standard answer.
It depends.
It depends.
And then Andressa follows up with, here's the deal. That's
deal.
Her signature.
Let me ask my clarification questions and then I go.
Right. But I want to say something, and I want to speak to the women listening. This is so important. You're talking about money goals. You're talking about lifestyle. You're talking about tax strategy. These are such powerful kind of strategic conversations that really need to get flushed out prior to investing actively or passively in any deal, hands down. Because quite honestly, a person could be like, hey, I can passively invest over the next 10 years, replace my income with this chunk of money, and I'll be financially set. Or that's not going to happen. So there's literally 15 to 20 different roads a person can take in this business. And I just feel like, and then you go to the passive route and say, I can either invest, in a syndication or I can lend my money out. I'm more interested in lending right now, quite honestly. We have syndications. We have so much depreciation and ways to, we're not high paid employees, me and my husband, right? Yeah. So that's not as important to me, right? What's important to me is getting more of a return right now. I'm more interested in getting 10 to 12%. And if I can lend my money out to, kind of like trusted operators, I'm much more interested in that than passively. And I'm passively investing in our own deals, but you know what I mean? Totally different goal set. Absolutely. So I just want to say that because I think so many women and so many investors really go to the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh question, because the first and second and third question actually takes energy. It takes time. It takes quiet time in your life. And quite honestly, it takes some strategic financial planning. And it's not like this big thing. It's literally, where do I want to be in 5 years? What kind of money do I need for that? I mean, this is not complex, but it takes time. And I just want to really put like a pin in that for women, because we just want to start doing something, should I do this or should I do that? And then we run ourselves in circles. God, can I tell you how many deals and properties we would not have bought when we first started had we done that kind of thinking and planning? Hands down, like so many things that we still own today, we would not have owned, and I just wish I did that type of work then. And it doesn't take like a strategic plan. I'm talking basic questions that we're talking about now, So anyway, I just want to put a pin in that because I think it's really important. A question for you as you navigate. So you're at your financial freedom number. What are you doing now to number one, maintain that number? Does not get discussed enough, because you sell something, that number can change, right? The market shifts, that number can change, right? We're all in flux. We had these 3 assets that we had making some passive income on. We sold them. So now you have to redeploy that money, not get hit on taxes. And how do we make that money up, right? So these are all things that are real stuff. So how are you kind of maintaining your number, maintaining your business, growing your business, and staying true to kind of like the lifestyle that you want, to kind of keep things moving along? How are you managing that? And what are you doing to put in place, kind of just keeping yourself in check?
Yeah, that's a great question, Liz, because you come to the point where, you all this time you're trying to scale and you have a number and a goal and you're like, when I'm at this point, I have more choices, and that's absolutely true. But then you also get to that point and you're like, so what next, right? So that's a big question. And so the good thing is that in the last year, I've also had performance coaches, business coaches, and personal coaches, and so and that really helps because that was my thing. I was like, I'm here and I'm scaling back because I want to spend time with the kids, and so but I can also grow, and now because I'm in this space, I know what those growth opportunities are and what should I be doing, and so it was eye-opening for me to be told that I can do both things. I can still be present for the kids and still continue to grow. So I do have some growth goals. In terms of what I'm doing with my portfolio, I like to just buy and hold list. So most of what I have. So when I do the rehabs and stuff, that I'm super active. But then after you're done with that, it just shifts into that passive mode where then you're just collecting the checks, and even if you're self-managing, it is super passive. So and then what happens with the market shifts is that the property prices can go up and down, but the rents typically, and even with the 07-08 crash, rents typically tend to plateau or go maybe a dip, take a little bit of a dip. So I'm hoping that even if there is a correction, the rents stay pretty flat, especially depending on what markets you pick. And the markets I picked are, I picked Houston as one of my favorite markets because it's a hybrid market. Rents keep growing because of job growth and stuff. So I'm anticipating rents to not drop significantly. So as long as I'm holding, I'm okay. But again, with the tax strategies, I do have money coming in, and I will be deploying it. And I'm probably just going to continue to grow without selling much. That's just my strategy. It works for my goals. It's what I saw my parents do also. It's almost always just buy and hold. And then if you are selling, then either use a 1031 exchange to defer the paying taxes on that, or use advanced strategies, purchase something else, and then cost segregate that so you're sheltering those taxes. I doubt I'm going to be selling anything that I've purchased in my portfolio because I like my portfolio to be more younger properties, less than 15 years old, and because I wanted that long-term hold. And that's just what works for me. I know a lot of people like scaling every 3 years, just taking all that lazy equity that's sitting in there and then just doing a 1031 exchange and purchasing something. For me, if I have lazy equity sitting in there, I like to do a cash out refinance, pull that money out, and then buy another property. So if equity goes up, and I've done that with my portfolio in the last year. So if there is another significant, increase in equity in my properties, and I'm at a point where I think cash out refinances would still work for my portfolio, I may consider doing that and then continue to grow and just build my portfolio based on that. And I think a good thing for people to also remember is that if you have a great system in place, like with a great team and in a great market, and you know what you're doing, it's super simple to just continue to build on that without having to develop another system. And if I were to do anything at this time with my kids being so young, I'd probably keep it super passive and just build on the systems that I already have in place. So I prefer to just do cash out refinances and then just keep those properties there, but tap into that hidden equity and then just build if I need to, and then use all those tax savings and use that to continue to build. I'm likely going to stick to the same markets and continue to do the same things. I may do more burrs because they are more renovations because they force appreciation, and all of a sudden you have a great property. A lot of and it's easier to get those properties, especially in the current market, because they sit on the market longer. A lot of people don't want to take on the work, but I have systems in place, so it's super easy for me to pick those up at maybe a little bit of a discount and then just force appreciation rapidly. So that's what I see happening within in the next few years.
Makes a lot of sense. The question though, with your buy and hold, what type of buy and holds are you involved in?
So it's mostly single family homes, townhomes, and they are in the markets where I think there's this good, a job growth and market appreciation. So they're hybrid markets mostly. Yeah. But
townhomes in general.
And single family
homes. Are those
homes
part of condo associations? Or
they're all part of HOAs, but they're not condos. I started to stay away from condos, but it's mostly single family homes and townhomes.
Okay.
I find that with the financing tends to be better with those. And I think if I were to go big, and I am considering doing this, I would consider GPing like a larger apartment complex, something that's possibly 80 units or larger, just because now you have in-house property management. And I think that there's just economies of scale work better over there. Whatever's in between, I'm more comfortable with staying either with the single family homes or just moving much larger into the greater than 80 units where you have in-house property management, just because I feel that would be more hands-off and easier for me to handle in terms of financing and in terms of property management.
Makes a lot of sense. And it just depends on, what type of, because people think syndication's like passive, but if you're building a syndication business, it's very active.
It is.
It's a business, right? You're building a business, and then, you're also potentially investing, but you're almost like investing as an LP. But if you're on the GP side, you're actively running that business. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that, right? Not that that's a right or wrong thing. It's just something that I think people see it on the outside and see it as like this passive thing, but it's really not, I mean, it doesn't mean you do it all. And the in-house property management, what I've seen too, is there's a lot of, there is an economy of scale. We haven't brought property management in-house yet. And we know various people who have and who do that. But yeah, there's probably pros and cons. That's an interesting piece and discussion point. So, in terms of like your biggest learning since you have quit your job, what would be, just as we kind of close things out, what would be something you wish you knew before you quit your job, or not quit, but I know you're doing it one day a week, but what's one thing that you wish you knew when you left your kind of full-time job, or something that you wish you kind of did or realized now that you do realize?
Oh, I don't know how to answer that, Liz, because I almost feel like it's the honeymoon period, right? So it's just like, but right now I'm just enjoying it so much. I had a lot of fears about quitting the job with benefits, and my job was awesome. It had a pension plan and healthcare benefits at the age I retired at the age of 58, which was like another 18 years. But my kids would be out of the house at that point, and it just it was a really hard choice. It was a great job because I was also able to work from home 2 days a week, and I was going in 2 days a week. So I was giving up a lot of good things. And so it was hard to make that choice. But I think I was more afraid of leaving than I needed to be, because now that I've done it and I've taken that leap, I almost feel like I did not understand how joyful it was going to be. Like I wake up and I suddenly don't have to do 5 things at the same time. And it makes me feel guilty almost. I'm like, wait, why is it that I'm only doing one thing at a time? Why is it that I'm not running? Why is it that I'm playing with my daughter on the swings in the middle of the day and I have nothing else to be doing? So I also think it's very important when you get to this point to be super intentional about how you're spending your time, because I still have my coaching business. I still have the real estate that I'm managing. I'm doing a BRRRR right now. So I think it's important to be intentional about how you structure your day, taking blocks of time out for the kids, but also having that time for yourself. And I think as women, we tend to put ourselves last. So you really need to take the time out for yourself, take the time out for your other businesses. So even when you have the time, being intentional is super important. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do what you're doing or be present with your kids or your family the way you want to be. So, but otherwise, I think you should ask me this question a few years from now, Liz. I probably will have more insight. Right now, I'm just enjoying this so much. And it's just been a blessing.
What I hear you saying too, and I think it's a really, really good lesson for the women listening, is that something that you did, you didn't realize how much joy you would have gotten. You didn't realize how much joy you were going to get from it as a result. And I think often we delay our gratification. As women, we delay our decisions. We really, things seem so much bigger in our heads for everything. I mean, you can even take that on a simple level. Whatever decisions we're making seem really big, especially leaving your, I mean, you were doing something that you were probably very good at and passionate about. I mean, it wasn't like you were stepping away from something that you didn't have a connection to. Yeah. That's big, and things just seem bigger. So I think whatever decisions, the women listening are making, are need to make, we need to make them with intention. And we also need to say, what's the cost and the benefit of this? Because we often look at what the negative things that can happen. I'll have to go back to my job, or I won't make the kind of money I think I'm going to make. I mean, we all go to like negative land very quickly. But what's the benefits that are come from it? The joy I'm going to feel, the fact that I can take my child to the park in the middle of the day. I mean, these are things that we can all get behind big time. So just to put a pin in that, just to kind of reiterate that for the women listening, right? I think we often think about all the things that can go wrong. And I love that you're saying that. I didn't realize how much joy I would get from it. And maybe I could have done it even sooner or right. And God, so many things like that. So that's great stuff. Param, this has been great. Where can the ladies listening learn more about you and, follow you along your journey?
Yeah, I have a website. It's www.generationalwealthmd.com. And for anyone who's been listening from the beginning, and you want to run your financial independence numbers, I have a financial independence worksheet on there that's free that you can download. I have calculators for long-term rentals and short-term rentals that also help you run those numbers. So those are great free resources. I have a blog where I talk about, basics for anyone who's just beginning to start out. So I think that there's a lot of free resources over there. I also have a Facebook group, Generational Wealth MD, and that's a nice place to connect with people who are on the same journey, who are, looking for financial freedom and to get that balance in life. Yeah.
Great. All this information you guys can find on our show notes. Now we're going to transition to our fabulous 3 questions. And the first one is, what's the most transformational book you ever read?
I think I have to go back to Rich Dad Poor Dad because that was the point where everything shifted for me. And I continue to lean back on that and draw from that. So yeah, absolutely.
It's always right. Second question is, what's the most powerful routine that you do to create a financially free and balanced life?
I think meditation. I do meditate every day. And then again, as I said, being very intentional about how I structure my day and taking blocks out for my kids where, there's no phone around me and I'm being completely present, because the whole point of this, of financial independence, is just to be there, to be completely present in everything you're doing. And it doesn't happen without being intentional about it. So I have Monday.com. I use that. I structure my day, but I have like blocks that are carved out and days that are carved out for being just with the kids, being present and just doing, just being completely there for them.
That's awesome. The last question is, which woman, famous or not, has inspired you the most?
I would have to just say my mom, because she's just an amazing woman. She works so hard. She gives so much of herself, without boundaries, which I don't think it's all good, but it's amazing how someone could do that. And then she's also an amazing real estate investor. And I've come to appreciate that more recently, for everything that they've achieved, how much they've done. So I would say it has to be my mom.
Awesome. Param, thank you so much for being on our show. Thanks for sharing your great knowledge and path and journey with us and our community. So we appreciate your time so much.
Thank you so much, Liz and Andres. I had so much fun being with you guys.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to receive updates on our next interviews, go to our website, realestateinvestor.com. There, you can subscribe to our show, become part of our investor community, and get updates on upcoming episodes.
If you like our show, please share it with other women who would benefit. And don't forget to leave us a rating on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And as always, we encourage you to take one action as a result of today's show and put it into motion so you can live both a financially free and balanced life. Thanks for spending time with us.
Ciao.